Back as we turn to some significant news out of the Middle East. A senior Israeli official tells NBC News that President Biden's description of the latest ceasefire proposal is, quote, not accurate. The official specifically disputed that Israel has agreed to fully withdraw its troops from Gaza, a clause, the second phase of the proposal. The comment comes as far-right members of the Israeli government have voiced their opposition to the deal. President Biden announced the framework on Friday, describing it as a durable end to the conflict. The three-phase plan begins with a 6-week truce and the return of women, children, and other vulnerable hostages in exchange for the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. Israeli troops would also withdraw from populated areas of Gaza. The second phase would see a permanent end to the war, as well as the release of the remaining hostages. The third phase outlines a 3 to 5 year period of reconstructing Gaza and the establishment of a non-Hamas Palestinian government. Hamas, at this point, has responded positively to the proposal, though not officially accepting it. Now the U.S. is urging both sides to indeed accept the terms, while cautioning that more negotiations will need to take place, especially when it comes to moving to phase 2, the permanent ceasefire.
All this progress would make Israel more secure, with Israeli families no longer living in the shadow of a terrorist attack. And all this would create the conditions for a different future, a better future for the Palestinian people. One of self-determination, dignity, security, and freedom. This path is available once the deal is struck. For months, people all over the world have called for ceasefire. Now it's time to raise your voices and demand that Hamas come to the table, agrees to this deal, and end this war that they began. Of course, there'll be differences on the specific details that need to be worked out. That's natural. If Hamas comes to negotiate, ready to deal, then Israel negotiations must be given a mandate, the necessary flexibility to close that deal.
Joining us now, retired CIA officer Mark Palmeropoulos. He's an NBC News security and intelligence analyst. Mark, good morning. Thanks for joining us. So let's get your reaction to this breaking news from a senior Israeli official who says that the president does not quite have the details correct of this proposal, particularly on the idea of moving troops out of Gaza. Do you think, from what we know of this deal, do we think that both sides will eventually take it?
Well, Jonathan, good morning. And I think, President Biden, that was a masterful play on a Friday night speech. Particularly, this is the Sabbath in Israel when some of the more, hardline members of the coalition do not have access to media. And he put forth a plan, which in essence was the Israeli plan. Now, there's going to be some back and forth on this. And, you got to remember, Henry Kissinger once said, Israel has no foreign policy. They only have domestic politics. And in some sense, Biden's move was a reflection of that. But at the end, there might be some back and forth. You also have some Israeli officials over the last several days saying, no, actually, this was what the Israeli negotiating team did put forth. Don't forget that the Israeli negotiating team, along with the war cabinet, was aware of this proposal, but the entire cabinet and the Israeli population were not. So lots of moving parts. I think that ultimately the two sides could get together. We've been optimistic before. The last piece on this, and I'll throw this out there, I'm not entirely sure that Bibi Netanyahu has what it takes to do this, but he has a visit to Washington within 8 weeks. There's arrest warrants out for him, but there's a chance for him to kind of reshape his legacy. Will he take this? It really remains to be seen. One tries to be optimistic. At the end of the day, there's no other plan B. So again, a masterful move by the Biden administration. Let's see what happens next. Let's see actually if Hamas can accept this as well.
Yeah, we'll come back to Hamas in a moment, but staying with President Biden and Netanyahu, it did seem like the president was trying to box in the prime minister here a little bit. We know Netanyahu's taking a lot of pressure from the far-right part of his coalition to not take this deal. And he's certainly got one eye at all times fixed on his own political future. So tell us a little bit more here about the dilemma that Netanyahu faces.
So he has the more extreme members of his coalition who are now threatening to withdraw from the government if the deal collapses. That's Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. One of the interesting things will be, if does the Israeli opposition actually come to the rescue of Netanyahu? It says if he does take this deal, they'll keep the government afloat only for a short period of time. Kind of lots of moving parts here. But again, there's a fundamental disconnect between some of Netanyahu's numerous statements about finishing Hamas off entirely versus what his negotiating team put forward. Does he do something that is historic but risk his own political survival? And I think these are his calculations. Never underestimate him. A lot of us can criticize Netanyahu for good reason, but he is, frankly, a survivor. And so in the next several days, we'll kind of go forward. One idea, of course, is that he actually okayed this proposal knowing that Hamas, or expecting that Hamas would reject it as well. So lots of moving parts. Netanyahu's legacy is on the line. And again, don't forget, this is in the backdrop of a visit to the United States and an address of Congress in the next 8 weeks, which will be, have really profound effects both here in the United States and abroad as well.
Unclear if Netanyahu will also get a White House invite when he is in Washington later this summer. So, Mark, tell us about, is there a sense that Hamas will indeed reject this? Address that, and then also just give us the latest as to what Israelis' moves in Rafah might be. Tanks spotted in the center of town.
Right. So, I think a lot of this, when we discuss this proposal, kind of fails to address the notion of would Hamas accept this deal as well, because there's parts of this where it's unclear if this would be an actual full cessation of hostilities. And don't forget that the Biden administration has also, in essence, given a green light for Israel to go forward with the elimination of, Hamas senior leaders. That's a whole separate kind of intelligence, kinetic campaign. That Hamas is going to be under incredible pressure from the Qataris. I think what the U.S. is really counting on is for both Qatar and Egypt to bring Hamas to the table on this. But again, Yahya Sinwar, who in essence is calling the shots, he's deep underground somewhere in a tunnel in Gaza. What does his legacy, want to be? Is he willing to actually call an end to the war as well? So, we shall see. Finally, on Rafah, you have the Israelis, the Americans, and the Egyptians, the Qataris as well, meeting on this. One of the things that certainly the Egyptians want to see is for Rafah to reopen. But I think a lot of this has to do if Israel and Hamas can come to a deal.
Yeah, a very delicate moment in this conflict. We, of course, will stay on every single detail. We appreciate the insights this morning from retired CIA officer Mark Polymeropoulos. Mark, thank you again.